All right, we're back. Sorry about that. Again, learning curves. I was recording today for the YouTube channel, and I forgot to set the settings back for stream. Unfortunately, I do not have fiber optic internet, and although my computer is quite capable of doing fun things, not with a crappy internet connection. So, oh, looks like that got pushed over. Perfect. So, with all that being said, let's hear what we can hear.
Began this new stage.
The day before, U.S. President Joe Biden said Israel proposed a deal involving an initial 6-week ceasefire. It would include a partial Israeli military withdrawal and the release of some hostages, while negotiating a permanent end to hostilities.
Oh dear.
It's time for this war to end. For the day after to begin.
Netanyahu's comments have raised questions.
You know, this is going to seem petty. I'm not even going to lie. What I'm about to say is petty. I read the thing that they quoted him on saying just now. And when I read that, I read it in my mind. I think maybe with Biden's voice. And it just sounded exponentially more epic and presidential than what that just sounded like. That was pitiful.
End. For the day after to begin.
That is pitiful. It should... Hold on, where was the whole thing?
While negotiating a permanent end to hostilities.
It's time for this war to end. For the day after to begin.
Netanyahu.
It is time for this war to end and the day after to begin. Like, I would rather have the actor who played the president in the original Independence Day be our actual president. I say that. The actor and the character of that actor be our actual president than what we currently have, because at least that man had spine and could actually inspire people. And I think that's what we're missing, honestly. We are missing inspiration in this country. We're missing anything resembling just hope, willingness, work, the ability to work together, hope that it can be done, just even the knowledge that it can be done, right? We're just missing so much of what makes a country anymore, and our leaders just are lackluster at best. What he should have said, well, now I don't remember what was said, the whole speech.
End to hostilities.
It's time for this war to end. For the day after to begin.
What he should have said is, it is time for this war to end and for tomorrow to begin. That would have had some gravitas. And you know what, Oshun, you're right. That is the one thing that Obama had going for him. You know, that hope and change really did provide a whole lot of hope with no change whatsoever. And it's just, yeah, he what was the quote? He made the imperialism go down smooth. I'm not saying I want to be lied to and lulled back into a false sense of security with regards to, like, you know, that. But at least people were inspired during the Obama administration. People genuinely believed that something good was going to happen and that the country could be better. My president is black, my Lambo is blue, right? That still rings out. It still rings out in my ears. Granted, war criminal. Granted, separating kids in cages, deporting migrants at a much higher rate than any other president, to include Donald Trump. Guilty of significant war crimes through Gitmo, right? Absolutely not necessarily a pristine leader. But for a moment there, we believed. None of that. And none of that in any of the other candidates either, I might add, which I think is just as problematic. We don't have leaders who inspire people to be better, that aspire to some sort of greatness, to encourage people to challenge themselves, right? To give something that can be built and worked on together. We don't have that kind of leadership. We just don't, and we don't have those kind of candidates. I mean, I would love to say that I'm one of them, but I don't have the influence or the resources or the gravitas to follow through either. I can talk a good game here on Twitch, and I could follow through if I had the millions of dollars needed to run for president. But I don't. So I can only inspire those who watch. I can only encourage those who watch and listen and be a part of this channel. And I am proud to say that I have helped and encouraged people to run for office, and some of them have actually won. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm hoping to build on that as the days, weeks, months, and years go on. Because I do believe that is what we're missing, and I do believe that is what we deserve as a country. Now, it looks like we're still dealing with the tearing issue, but I mean, I don't know how much more I can reduce the resolution on this thing before it goes into 16-bit, you know what I mean? What I can do is try and stay in the middle and not get knocked off. And I appreciate the sentiment, Oshun. Let's see, you also said, I sure did believe his BS. He's so good at talking that I have to remind myself how full of it he is whenever I listen to him talking. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying like everything the man has ever done ever is bad. I'm saying that as a president, he had his flaws, and he is guilty of not an insignificant number of crimes. It's just, you know, when you're dealing with lesser of two evils, he truly is the lesser of two evils. Am I not supposed to stand there? I legitimately don't know what I'm supposed to be doing in this fight, other than not dying. Okay, so we're all gonna stand here. Ah, yeah, that's how I died before. Oh, okay. Well, that one's smoother. There we go.
Netanyahu's
Whoops.
45 was the best of all time. Because we can always trust them to tell
Again,
it
my
like
keybinds
by phone with top officials from the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Egypt regarding the proposal, a State Department spokesperson said on Saturday. Ceasefire talks have stumbled for months over a clash in core positions. The war began on October 7th when Hamas-led Palestinian fighters rampaged into southern Israel from Gaza, killing more than 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and seizing more than 250 as hostages, according to Israeli tallies. Israel's ground and air campaign in Gaza has left the territory in ruins, led to widespread starvation, and killed more than 36,000 people, according to Palestinian health authorities.
By the way, that 36,000 people that are killed and that are accounted for is literally what is accounted for from the time that Palestinians could still account for the dead. The reason why the death toll has plateaued is because they literally don't have the infrastructure to literally count the dead. Like, I don't think I can truly convey to you how horrendous that is to put into words, that there are so many casualties and that there's been so much destruction to the remainder of Palestinian nation that they are unable to account for the dead. That's insane. And yes, many are still buried under the rubble. Yeah, the war began in October 7th. That's the thing, right? Like, what is this? News 18 click? I mean, how reputable are they, right? I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying they're a bad news network. I'm just saying like they're that's what we deal with. That is literally when history began and ended for the Israel and Palestinian conflict. And I have a few videos coming out on my political channel that really get a little bit deeper into the U.S.-Israeli relations and how that spurred the Middle Eastern conflicts and how that also translated into Palestinian occupation. And yeah, it was 75 years ago. And actually, it began in 1919, believe it or not. After World War I, the United States president and, of course, Western powers were in cahoots to discuss a homeland for Israel. And at that time, in 1919, post-World War I, not World War II, World War I, it was discussed to establish an Israeli state in Palestine. It was after World War II where that was finally implemented, and in around 1949 when the United States was the first nation to recognize their newly recognized statehood. Yeah, absolutely insane. I did not know that myself until I researched the topic in greater depth, which again goes to show that even informed Americans who are trying to be informed or trying to be on top of current events, learn about the geopolitical history and the events and all this other fun stuff. Even somebody like myself who has gone out of their way to generate, create, and craft policy that is amenable to the greater good and longevity of humanity in our country, right? How to develop our society to be, ambassadors to the world instead of conquerors. Even somebody like me, a political junkie, was unaware of that historical fact. And it's kind of shocking when you think about that and then consider how much more do we not know? How much more are we misled to believe? And why is our media complicit in that? And when you start asking those questions and finding those answers, i.e. its design, it becomes obvious why things are the way they are, right? We are discouraged to vote. We are discouraged to register. We are discouraged to participate. We are discouraged to demand better. We're discouraged to ask for higher wages. We're discouraged to demand better working conditions. We're discouraged to demand better healthcare, access to healthcare, cheaper education, more affordable housing. We're discouraged to do anything that would benefit our lives. And we have been broken down and broken down and broken down for so long that we have forgotten what it is to be a country and to be community. On a slightly lighter note, as a dragoon, I'm going to basically do whatever the hell I want because I can.
Authorities.
Oh, that's not. So, I don't understand why they're doing the Lord of the Rings march on the tower music while reading this, but again, news and media have just become a new form of entertainment, which is truly disturbing. But I will read this. Israel's conditions for ending the war have not changed. The destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities, the freeing of all hostages, and ensuring that Gaza no longer poses a threat to Israel. Under the proposal, Israel will continue to insist these conditions are met. Oh. I thought it was going to scroll further, but you get the idea. Essentially, we will not stop until Hamas is erased. But everything's Hamas, according to Israel, right? Anything that challenges the Israeli leadership and administration, or specifically Netanyahu, is Hamas. We saw that with the United Nations aid workers. We saw that with the journalists that were reporting on what was literally happening in Gaza. Every single one of them were Hamas. So Hamas is any enemy that Israel believes exists. And if that's the case, this war will never end, not just in Palestine, but in the Middle East. They will find Hamas in Egypt. They will find Hamas in Yemen and Syria and all these other places that Israel has instigated conflict with in the past and currently. Is it mine?
Christians, did you know there's a biblical solution to getting rid of toenail fungus? It's been hiding in plain sight all this time.
That's odd. I thought I did change my resolution. Yikes. That shouldn't have any bearing, though, if it's streaming at 19 or 1600 by 900. So Hamas is still an organization that exists, but that's about it. And here's the other thing too. Like, why are we negotiating with Hamas and not the government of Palestine, right? Such that it is. And furthermore, right? Like, okay, Hamas is the entity that did the attacking, so they need to be negotiated with. Then that means you're recognizing Hamas as a power, as an authority. Well, you can't, if you're going to recognize them as an authority, but also claim to erase them from existence before any sort of peace in Palestine, what are you doing? You're basically just coming up with a convenient excuse to fight a global war on terror. Or I'm sorry, to stop terrorism from attacking the Twin Towers. Protecting Israel. Like, this is insane. Literally, all Hamas wants, and as they have been repeating, is saying, "Hey, leave our people alone. Stop murdering us." Like, that's literally the most reasonable request that any quote-unquote terrorist organization has ever made of a sovereign state. Stop murdering people. And it's not even stop murdering people or the attacks will continue, because there haven't been attacks. That's the other thing that is not discussed in these conversations at all, is that Hamas has not conducted a single attack in the past 5 months. There has been no retaliation. There has been no military response from Palestinians or Hamas since October, 5 months ago. This entire time that Israel has essentially been massacring and pushing the Palestinian people into Rafah. Like, I don't know how else to stress that what is happening over there is beyond egregious. And this isn't even self-defense. This is straight up legalized or trying to justify a massacre of a people for no reason whatsoever. What is going on? Why can I not target? What is going on? I think it's very irresponsible of this network to provide this information as if it were some sort of fantasy adventure.
מהבוקר מדינת ישראל נמצאת במלחמה.
But that's why I'm saying our news and journalism has basically turned into another form of entertainment. And that is just as disturbing as anything else that's happening in our country. This is literally what Palestine looks like right now, Gaza. So I don't think we're going to get any more news out of that. But suffice to say, this conflict will continue until either the United States actually steps in and stops Israel from committing war crimes, or until every last Palestinian is dead. That's what is going to happen. This war will continue until every last man, woman, and child in Palestine is dead. Or the United States decides to grow a spine and hold Israel accountable. So let's do something a little less depressing. Let's do Simone Biles.
Extraordinary night one for the 8-time U.S. champ.
Wow. Crooked right away, but pulls it back on. After day one, she was first on this event.
And everything else.
I was going to get there, Terry.
So this is the routine that Simone used
She's
and performed.
really
I think is the more correct way of saying that.
Brings that to this
when she
event
won her
especially.
9th championship.
Gearing up for 3 flips right in a row. Handspring layout, layout. Boom. The judges really look for calm and clean landings, and Simone does a really good job of making her skills so quick to that finish position and moves on, so the judges don't even have time to possibly see a mistake. She had that little misstep right at the beginning, but the rest of the routine was pretty solid.
2 years away from competition
I'm not an
after the
expert.
experience
That
in
seemed
Tokyo
pretty
at
solid.
the Olympics, which was disappointing yet inspirational in many ways, and all the speculation on whether or not she would return, try to make it to Paris for the Olympics again. We saw her at an event a few weeks ago, night one, and now to open up night two, and just sensational stuff.
Yeah, this is, in my eyes, what really makes Simone great.
let's
Moments
see.
like this, where she's
Now
off
she'll do her
difficulty
floor routine.
sparingly. So coaches say we're hoping.
These can be quite impressive. Apparently, the one thing I did learn is that they actually have to dance
Looks like she
all around
had
the thing.
that
Like
out
they
of
can't just
bounds on the
walk
first pass,
to their next thing. They have to do some sort of
but
action.
stays in on her second pass. I mean, most people are trying to put their tumbling passes to her feet. She's just trying to stay in bounds.
That might be the closest thing to gymnastics I could actually accomplish. It's spinning on my foot. Wow. She basically twisted in midair. It's not nothing. Get back to the fight here. She gets
That
so
last
much
pass is as
airtime.
perfect as she could do it, and she looks like she's having a lot of fun.
Mom loves it.
I love that no matter how many times her parents have watched her do amazing on the competition floor, they still get this excited.
And this nervous at times, too. You can kind of tell.
But her coach, Cecile Landy, said it's not even her skills that stand out, but it's her attitude and her behavior. She truly, good body position.
I mean, look at
she
that.
knows exactly where she is. Clean
Though, too, she's just trying to stay in bounds.
Pretty
She knows
impressive.
she's going to.
medal because Laurent Landy versus under rotating it.
Overall, I mean, looking as good as ever. Second vault. Okay.
Wow.
And that's
Again,
a Chung vault.
You don't have to
same
know much
vault
about
that
anything
Sky
to know that
Blakely
she stuck
did.
that landing.
Jade Carey does.
But Sam,
She doesn't even look
she
happy.
makes it look so easy.
She does. She's such a quick twitched athlete that it's almost hard to count the amount of times that she rotates in the air because that's how fast it is.
Guys, that first vault she did, by the way,
Yeah.
you know, she got a 15. No one else in the competition got closer than half a point.
By the way, just to remind people, you do 2 vaults if you want to try to win the vault individual title.
Yeah, her block off the table is truly incredible. And if you're wondering what a block is, just put your arms above your head and do a shoulder shrug. That's basically what they're doing, except upside down.
I'm trying right now. I'm not succeeding, though. And Simone Biles in first by far. 5.7 points the lead going into the final rotation.
Wow, that's
Gonna
pretty
finish
dominant.
up on uneven bars.
How much is that? 5 points. I'll tell you what that is. That's entering the fourth quarter of a football game up 35 points.
Yeah.
Is what she's looking at right now. 5 points, 1 point for a fall. So in theory, she could fall 5 times.
I was going to say, it's like everybody in the competition has fallen 5 times already. Massive difference for her. So she's just got to get through this bar routine. Very little pressure on her, but always a good opportunity. Smooth release moves.
I don't always know what's impressive on these, other than what looks cool.
She has such an efficient bar routine, really minimizing those handstands, potential deductions.
Wow.
2 steps on the dismount, but man, she
didn't lose a
good
point
this weekend. There's this joy I notice from her when she starts and ends her routine that I haven't seen in a long time.
Cecile talked about that, and you mentioned it. It's not just the skills. It's the enjoyment right now. The attitude.
Yeah, people ask, can she handle the pressure? It really doesn't look like she has a weight on her shoulders like we've seen from her maybe in past competitions or that
Why am I
past
dying
quad.
so much on
that's
this
what
fight?
I like noticing
maybe it's
from
'cause
her,
I'm
and you
not
could see
paying
that
attention.
mental work she's doing outside of the gym have a really positive effect on her gymnastics.
So is this where we're going to get the response that she got it?
Line full into a double-double. That's an upgrade she brought back this year, increasing her start value, that D score.
Jonathan able to watch and celebrate eventually.
And you know, this event wasn't always her best, but she was in first place on bars after day 1. That's a big accomplishment for her.
She's told us that time. I sometimes dread.
Hey, you're still young in our hearts, Oshun.
Good. There's anxiety there for bars. So there is that number 14-4 on uneven bars, a little lower than opening night, but still very good for Simone Biles.
Simone, Terry just said your 9th U.S. championship title. I just want to take a moment for that. Incredible stuff. I'm sure each win has its own story. What's a summary of what this one means?
Today it's just getting out here, getting comfortable and confident in my gymnastics, and hopefully going to Olympic trials and making that next step towards Paris. So I couldn't be more proud of how I'm doing this time in the year.
Olympic
and just
trials
gaining
as
that confidence over
the
and over,
singular
getting
most
myself back in
dominant
front of a crowd
athlete in
and
her
just
sport.
doing what I do in practice.
Your facial expressions are priceless. How have you learned to move on to the next skill and routine after something happens?
Well, I'm kind of a veteran. It's not my first time out there. I'm a little bit older, so I know exactly how to kind of reboot and recollect myself to move on to the next event. Even if I feel like something wasn't how I wanted it to go, I know exactly how to switch my mindset and keep going. And I think it's years of therapy. Cecile and Laurent are amazing, as well as having good...
But you know what? That's actually something that people don't really talk about a lot either. And I know politics and gaming and this, that, and the other, and I've been dying a lot, and I'm picking myself back up and getting right back into the fight, and the healer hasn't kicked me from the group yet. But, you know, it's true. Being able to get back up and be like, yep, that happened, that sucks, it wasn't great, but being able to focus onto the next thing, that is such an unmentioned, untalked about skill. And it's something that could be, I guess, taught, but like is not nearly valued enough. The only thing we care about is winning and succeeding, or winning and succeeding at the expense of others winning and succeeding. And I don't, that's not the way things should be. So good on Simone for really highlighting that point. and embodying it. I don't know what she thought she didn't do well there. I mean, I know that when you land, you're not supposed to move after the fact, but I mean, short of actually falling down, I don't think it actually hurts you that much.
Teammates.
You talked about confidence, but are you having fun with your gymnastics right now?
Yeah, everyone says I look like I'm having fun, so that's good because I feel like most of the time if I'm not stressing or have anxiety, I do feel like I'm having fun. So it's good to have that and feel that again.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. How was that for some, like, not just wholesome content, feel good, warmth after all of the horrible things, but like, doesn't that kind of fill you with like a little bit of national pride? Like, I get it. National pride in America, authoritarianism, scary words. I get it. But like, seeing her perform makes me proud to be an American. I think she is just that phenomenal of an athlete. I think it is also worth mentioning that women's sports have been winning a lot lately. And there's a lot to be said about that too. The fact that for so long, women's sports have been completely disrespected in America, just completely disrespected. And that now the women's NBA is actually getting larger numbers than the regular NBA, or the men's NBA, I guess we can call it now. And I think that's incredible. And the fact that like one of the most popular athletes in America, the most dominant athlete in America, is in fact Simone Biles. And we had Sha'Carri Richardson as well. Like women's sports and female athletes in our country are bringing the hype. And I think that's also something worth mentioning. Something that is clearly not brought up nearly enough. And something that I think we don't recognize because we take men's accomplishments for granted as the standard. And I don't know. I think that's kind of cool. I know if I switch back to the screen and change whatever is on the menu there, I'm gonna get myself keeled. Yes, the Williams sisters, you're right. They are still relevant, I believe. I think they're still active, aren't they? And still winning on top of that. I guess not that I meant to omit them by any stretch of the imagination. What I meant is that this newer generation of athletes is inspiring, I guess, more people to participate in sports, or it's finally becoming more mainstream to where the Williams sisters who walked so Simone Biles and Caitlin Clark could run is truly, bearing fruit. All right, this one I won't die. So let's, what was the other thing we wanted to watch? Well, there isn't anything that's as inspiring as that, but we could, I suppose, look into Americans think Trump should drop out and see what the reasons are. Let's try and be a little objective here. Obviously, Democrats are going to care. There we go.
Will you make a donation and stand with Kamala?
I'm not giving you a platform either, buddy. Nope, I'm not doing
ABC News and Ipsos is giving us our first snapshot at how independent voters feel about last week's verdict. Although 45% say the verdict was politically motivated, more than half of all independents, 52%, believe the jury reached the right conclusion and think it should end Donald Trump's 2024 campaign. Those numbers are even higher among voters with unfavorable opinions of both Trump and President Joe Biden, those so-called double haters.
That's funny, because I would consider myself a double hater for certainly. I think we shouldn't have Biden or Trump in office, and the fact that it's the choice between those two and RFK Jr. right now is kind of insane to me, especially when you do have people like Jill Stein who are running. Like, I get it. It's the Green Party in America. What's that? I get that that's the belief, but Jill Stein actually has a strong policy. And her domestic platform is probably the strongest, most robust platform of a presidential candidate currently running. Honorable mention to Cornel West, but still, You know what I mean? How is it that the best we have to offer are Joe Biden, who is facing genocide, charges, whose faculties are in question on the best of days, a 34-time convicted felon, among other things, or allegedly other things, RFK Jr., who's basically a dynasty throwback, and those are the three front runners according to the news. And then Jill Stein, who is a qualified candidate, and I would say a solid candidate for president, but in one of the least influential parties in the country. Like, that's the best that we got going right now. And I find it appalling. I truly find it appalling that is the state of our nation's affairs. What's more, even during the Republican primary, how difficult the news agencies made it for other candidates to run. That's the second thing. Like, by all means, not every Tom, Dick, and Harry should be able to run for president just because they're 35 and think they should. Fine. I'm not opposed to that. But the barrier to entry is tens of thousands of dollars and an infrastructure that would require tens of thousands of dollars to establish to even do polling information. Like, we don't have an inclusive or an accessible democracy outside of maybe local and county races. And that's a major problem that we just do not talk about. So I'll get off my high horse.
Among that group, 65% say the verdict was correct, and 67% say it should end Trump's bid for the White House. So they appear to agree with Donald Trump. How we came in on the show here.
Yeah, so Sam Stein, we're looking at this double haters. Everybody's talking about the double haters, people that don't like Biden, people that don't like Trump. It's actually, if you dig into that, they are, of course, pollsters say they're the most important group. If you dig into it, you actually get a lot of animosity towards Donald Trump. And with Joe Biden, it's like, he's too old. He's all right. He's a good guy. Too old. Don't want him in there. So double haters actually is a bit of a misnomer. But they always seem to break overwhelmingly Biden's way. And here we see it again. 67% of this undecided group that's going to determine the outcome of the election think that the convictions should end Donald Trump's campaign. What say it should. You?
But that's the thing. Like, that's what I'm not understanding here. Like, this absolutely, unequivocally, I don't care if it was Donald Trump, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Jill Stein, Elizabeth Warren, AOC. I don't give a damn which of your favorite politicians it would have been. If you are found guilty of 34 felony convictions and you are facing jail time, them's the ropes. Like, you should not be eligible to run for that office. Like, I don't understand where the disconnect there is. I don't understand.
Mr. Stein.
Well, I think it's an alarming number. If you're Donald Trump, obviously, you can't afford to bleed that type of support anywhere. But that block in particular, you need to break to you specifically, right? I mean, he's going to win his voters. We know that. What he really needs in this election is those people who are on the fence, maybe a little bit wary of Joe Biden, breaking all the way his way. That said, I'm going to hold my judgments for polls that are not snapshot polls. That's right after the verdict. People may be reacting to the news. We're also 5 months out. As Jonathan pointed out, rightfully at the top of this, we have a lengthy history of people circling back towards Trump after egregious, seemingly crippling political moments, January 6th top among them. So let's wait and see and be sober about these polls.
Which, oh my goodness, that's something I'm impressed with that. It's true. People do end up forgiving Donald Trump his transgressions because he either commits new transgressions, and that's what dominates the news, and so the other thing doesn't seem as prevalent anymore. Or it's that something else happens that's more egregious, Yeah, I couldn't avoid. I didn't know where I needed to stand. And people are like, well, you know what? We're gonna hold this thing more accountable to the other guy than to Trump because we expect Trump to act a certain way. At the end of the day, what is the most problematic with Trump as a figure is he isn't trying to present himself as the best candidate, the most moral candidate, the most ethical candidate, a candidate at all. The only thing he presents himself as, I am not them. And so what that allows for is by not being them, whenever he does something, right, whether, heinous or not, whenever he does something, it always is with the onus that he is not them. And that is why people keep flocking back.
Numbers. I will say, look, it obviously doesn't benefit Donald Trump to have 34 guilty counts against him. It's not something that any candidate would want. I think he's trying to turn it into some sort of political favor. I don't think it's ignorance that other Republicans are comparing it to the show trials of the Stalin era. I think they know exactly what they're doing. They're not ignorant of it. They're trying to discredit the justice system because that's the card that they have to play here. The question, Joe, that you raised is, will the public, or at least will a good portion of the public, look at that and say, you know what, I'm all for it? Or will they say, you know what, our foundational system of government and the rule of law is too important? And it was telling to me that when Joe Biden came out and offered his first remarks on the trial last week, he did not go after the substance of the verdict. No one expected him to do that. What he did is he got really heated about the efforts by Republicans to undermine faith in the rule of law. And I think that's where he wants to point his anger.
And you know what? Again, I might not like Joe Biden. I am definitely a double hater. But I can't argue with that. He went up there and he was like, listen, I don't like the man any more than you do, but we can't just talk about the criminal justice system this way, right? Like we can't just flout the law because it's inconvenient for our personal beliefs. At least in that sense, in that moment, he was acting presidential. I will give Joe Biden that much credit.
And that's the case he wants to make heading into the election.
Yeah, and the politics of this are going to be so fascinating because, yes, there's polling that shows
Fascinating
but there is
isn't
a
the word I
percentage of
would
Republicans
choose.
who won't vote for Trump. At least they say they won't vote for Trump now that he's a convicted felon. But we're seeing the vast majority of the GOP in a frenzy and repeating Trump talking points, really trying to create an echo chamber about how unfair this verdict was. Now, let's see what Democrats do. We knew the president, that was the right thing to do, most people believe. His first remarks simply about we need to respect the process. But now what do fellow Democrats do? What does the camp?
But it will be very telling to see if Hunter Biden is found guilty for his crimes, which we discussed earlier in the stream. The buying or purchasing a weapon while not, what was it? By not disclosing his drug use or something like that. Point being, if Hunter Biden is found guilty, Joe Biden better come with that same energy saying we need to respect the rule of law. Because it's a federal offense that Hunter is being charged with, there is the room, not necessarily the likelihood, but the room that he could be pardoned by his father, which that would be political suicide, obviously. But it's something that begs the question and deserves to be said.
Campaign do? Eventually, what does the president himself do in terms of driving home this conviction as example of why Donald Trump is not fit for office? So now let's turn to the legal part of this and bring in former litigator and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Lisa, I hope you've had a chance to catch your breath after such a frenzied stretch. And we are a couple days out from the verdict now. Any sort of additional reactions now that you've had time to sit with this as to how it went down and give us your latest thoughts as to what the prosecution may seek in terms of penalty?
Let's start there. I think that the prosecution, notwithstanding Donald Trump's efforts to say that the people won't stand for his serving any jail time, I would be very surprised if the Manhattan DA's office doesn't seek some form of jail time here. And the reason is for two reasons, John. One is the severity of the conduct. We're talking about 34 counts, each of which could be punished by up to 4 years. Of course, they're not going to seek 4 years for each of these counts. Rather, they've asked for some sort of concurrent sentence where they're all grouped together. But it's hard for me to imagine that given the multiplicity of counts here, they're not going to seek some jail time. The other major factor, however, is the lack of remorse shown by the defendant. Not only do we have a defendant who's already been found in criminal contempt 10 times, but he continues to say...
I've never really discussed that part of the thing because of, one, just my lack of knowledge of it. Like, I don't have the facts, you know. I try to avoid that man as much as possible. But to the point, you know, it's kind of 10 counts of criminal contempt. But he's innocent. It's like, come on. Come on. Ooh, I might get this one finally. I've been trying to get that forever. Ever since I started playing this game. I may or may not need that. I may or may not be able to wear this. I think I can. And the hat. And we'll pass on those. And we'll roll for one of them. No big deal. Oh! Yes! Finally, I got my wind-up Ramza. This is where being on Twitch really comes into play because I am, in fact, a nerd. And what you might not know is I have a damn near encyclopedic knowledge of Final Fantasy, including Tactics. And Ramza is the main character of Final Fantasy Tactics. He's the guy. He's the main character. And in Final Fantasy 14, which is what we're currently playing, that particular raid instance, I guess they call it an alliance raid. Yeah. That particular... Ooh, we are not... Oh, wait, no, Trials? Okay, yeah. And that alliance raid is actually based off of the Final Fantasy Tactics universe. So the bosses are all either named characters or enemies in Final Fantasy Tactics. So like Sidolphus is Thunder God Sid. He's an actual playable character in Tactics and a BAMF boss, like definitely top tier. He is as difficult as he should be. He is as powerful as you would expect. The first boss, which was, I said I had encyclopedic knowledge and immediately forgot his name. It's not Meliodas. That's from the Seven Deadly Sins. But you get the idea. The first boss, he was the primary gunsmith. He was the shooter boy. But in Final Fantasy 14, you get what's called little minions. The minions guide, right? And these minions are also characters within Final Fantasy 14 or other games. Like Thancred is in this game, Final Fantasy 14. Whereas the Onion Knight, right? That's like from Final Fantasy era type, like OG. Same thing with Kain. That's Final Fantasy 4, OG Dragoon. Let's see if this is still going to be up when we get to the trial here. Sorry, I'm nerding out. I can't help it. And Ramza. There he be. That's my boy. I don't know if I can summon him in this fight, but hey. And then what else do we got in here? Oh, 2B, which is from the Nier Automata series. And then Minion, which is, I think, from that new little, that new mini game in the Gold Saucer, which I don't know if it's like a time event, but I won it from that thing earlier. So anyway, back at the rant.
Things about the verdict, about the process, about participants in the process who are covered by the gag order.
50 fighting Rama.
Theoretical violations of that gag order that haven't been brought to Justice Merchan's attention. That could be a part of any sentencing procedure. When he goes out and says, for example, that this is all a Biden administration-led cabal because one of the prosecutors here happened to have served in the Biden Department of Justice. That's the only connection at all that they can draw. That is a person who shows no remorse, a person who says the process is rigged, that the judge is corrupt, that the district attorney didn't want to bring this case but only did so under political pressure. That is a person who doesn't believe that they did anything wrong, as he continues to say, and I expect that to play a major factor in his sentencing.
You know, Lisa, one of the questions that I've had is, obviously we have no precedent for a former sitting president to be convicted of a felony on 34 counts. At the same time, if you're the judge, Judge Merchan must be thinking, okay, you know, I have to look at precedent in terms of sentencing. What is fair? And so are there high profile cases that you think he may be looking at? Are there, other examples that we can look to say, well, this might be what it looks like? I mean, what would be fair? I mean, there's no precedent. We're just kind of running blind here.
Judge Merchan is a person who historically has not been particularly lenient with white-collar defenders. It is also not the case, despite what Trump and his allies continue to say, that falsification of business records as a felony is not a traditionally prosecuted crime in Manhattan. In fact, it gets prosecuted all the time. What might be novel here is the combination of falsification of business records and an election law conspiracy under state law. It's New York election law 17152. That's the crime that Trump says nobody had any idea of what I was being accused of. That's not true at all. But again, if you're looking historically at have people committed falsification of business records that get bumped up to a felony because there is an underlying crime that they either intended to commit or conceal, that happens all the time in Manhattan, and Justice Merchan will take that into consideration.
So remember when we were listening to Ben Shapiro and saying that they just invented new laws and whatever else? Like, I'll take that with a grain of salt because, again, I don't know New York state law. But from what that sounded like, and Guevara, if you're available, please fact check that for us and provide a link if you can. If you can't, no, send me the link if you can to corroborate what she just said, because honestly, like, it just makes it that much more cut and dry that what he did was in fact a crime. It wasn't a newly invented law to go after him, and that there is significant precedent of white-collar criminal activity regarding this exact thing happening in New York. And that's what we're not prosecuting enough. We're so used to seeing white-collar criminals get away scot-free that when one finally gets charged, we're like, whoa, wait, that's got to be a conspiracy. No. Them's the ropes. That dem's the ropes. And them ropes should be a lot thicker and more consistent. But anywho, get to that whenever you can, please, Guevara. And now, I guess we'll go back to the depressing stuff. Akron shooting. All right.
This morning in Akron, one man is dead and 26 others are injured after a shooting just after midnight. Good morning to you. I'm Tessa DiTiro. This is video from our news crew on the scene this morning and overnight near Kelly Avenue and 8th Avenue. You can see dozens of evidence markers on the ground. Our crews report seeing shell casings, cups, fireworks, shoes strewn across the street. Akron police confirm a gun and several dozen shell casings were recovered. Officers were inundated with 911 calls just after midnight, reporting multiple people being shot. Then those victims flooding the local hospitals at Akron General and Akron City Summa Health Emergency Rooms. That is where we find our Elizabeth Van Metre this morning. Elizabeth, you have been working this story for hours, even speaking with a witness this morning.
Yeah, I sure did, Tessa. Yeah, a lot of those victims being treated right inside of here this morning. This is actually only about 5 minutes away from where that street party took place, where that shooting was. We have been able to confirm this morning that Cleveland Clinic Akron General is also treating patients. We know 7 patients are being treated over there. 1 is in critical condition. We've also been able to confirm that that hospital was on lockdown just after midnight last night. That lifted up around 3:26 this morning. Now, we know that this hospital also had heavy security overnight. We have video of that. You can see just how much security it was. You can see the police officers right at the entrance there. You can also see that there was blocking off of the ER itself. It was tense here. Police tape was up around those doors. Akron police confirmed to us that around midnight, 911 calls started coming in about multiple people being shot on 8th and Kelly Avenue.
Akron City and Akron General are both on diversion to all for a lockdown for a third shooting in the city of Akron.
Now, we spoke to a witness who told us that it looked like a street party. It looked fun at first. People were dancing. There was loud music. People were spinning out cars. But things at the street party turned pretty quickly.
There are about 500 people. It was something I've never seen before. Everyone was wearing white T-shirts. There were women on vehicles with no outfit, no clothing on, dancing, and everyone seemed to be having a good time. And I was just like, whoa, it looked like a scene from like a spring break movie. And then on our way back, it was completely a different scene.
Now, during initial investigations, police did find multiple shell casings around. They also did find a gun. No one is in custody at this time. This morning, we have a lot more questions than answers, including were there multiple shooters or was it just one shooter? And what led up to all of this morning in Akron? For News 5, I'm Elizabeth Van Mitri. Back to you.
Elizabeth, I know you're working on some of those answers. Thank you for your coverage this morning.
Here's why I stopped wasting money on expensive air conditioning, and you should too.
Tired of hot and stuffy room about a shooting.
News 5 begins now because that was breaking news.
That breaking news in North Olmsted, where police have arrested a woman accused of stabbing 2 people. Police say they received multiple 911 calls about a possible stabbing when they arrived at that Giant Eagle. They found 2 victims in the parking lot.
That has nothing to do with Akron. Well, I guess that as far as I thought in terms of breaking news, there would be more to it. Like there was, I don't know, ties of some sort to a criminal organization or something politically motivated. But it sounds like it was a party that devolved. That isn't to state the significance of the tragedy. I thought this was going to be more of like an active shooter situation. Some sort of motivation like that, some sort of crime of passion, or unfortunately racially or other sort of discriminationally motivated attack. I'm glad it wasn't. That's not what it seems like at all. But it is unfortunately just as we can say in America, a shooting crime. Well, I do suppose we could just type in news and see what's at the top of the hour, which still seems to be Trump. Trump and Claudia. All right.
Andy McCarthy, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. He's a Fox News contributor, and you've been seeing a lot of him. We're going to talk to him about the Trump verdict and appeal in just a moment. But first on Hunter Biden. This is the gun form that Hunter Biden filled out. We can show it here. And the charges against Hunter are false statement in the purchase of a firearm, false statement to a licensed firearms dealer, and possession of a firearm by an unlawful user of or addicted to a controlled substance. You wrote today in National Review that the Hunter Biden's only defense is the one the DOJ prosecutor gave him. How so?
Well, Dana, if he had been timely prosecuted, remember, this is something, I think Hunter obtained the gun on October 12th of 2018 and had it for about 11 days. The evidence against him is very strong. The law enforcement people were brought into this when the gun was lost. They tried to discard it. Precisely, it seems like how he Biden tried to discard it because they were worried that Hunter was drug-addled and might hurt himself or someone else. So it's a case that's pretty overwhelming, that's only become more overwhelming with time as Hunter has made a lot of statements about the condition he was in at that time. I don't think he's got much of an argument that he wasn't a drug addict at that time. But where he does have an argument is while David Weiss delayed in bringing the case for nearly 5 years, the Supreme Court in 2022 in the Bruen case basically made a ruling that calls into question a number of federal firearms restrictions, including whether it's constitutional under the Second Amendment to ban drug users and drug addicts from possession of firearms.
Hold up. What part of the Second Amendment stating well-regulated militia would not include literally preventing drug addicts from having guns? Like, this is... I mean, I guess he's right in the one sense that the precedent was set by, it went to the Supreme Court. Like, I'll grant you that. Like, the argument was made, but you don't have to be a constitutional Rhodes scholar to look at the Second Amendment that says a well-regulated militia being necessary to protect and defend the United States, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed. A well-regulated militia. We aren't a militia, and like the average citizen is not a militia, for one. For two, if we're just gonna be like, hey, you can have a gun with no argument whatsoever, then why do we have age restrictions? Why are there age restrictions on weapons? Why are there restrictions at all on the type of firearm? Why can't we get fully automatic? Why can't we get RPGs? Why can't we buy tanks and shoot off 30 millimeter or however big those rounds are? I mean, you get to where I'm going with this. Like, the Second Amendment doesn't explicitly say you can't do drugs and buy guns, so clearly that means I can do whatever I want. That's an asinine argument.
Therefore, he now has a defense that he wouldn't have if he were timely tried in 2018 or 19, or if he had pled guilty then, Bruen wouldn't be an issue.
So basically, his attorneys are going to argue that he just came out of an 11-day rehab plan, and they'll argue that he was sober at the time. Let's turn to Trump right now and about this appeal. Here's Will Scharf from over the weekend on ABC. Watch.
The president's going to cooperate with the pre-sentence investigation, and we're going to speedily appeal this unjust verdict. I think this case is replete with reversible error. We plan to vigorously defend President Trump's rights in the appellate courts all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary.
So the appeal is 30 days after the sentencing, so the window opens on July 11th. I don't know if this appeal happens before the election. It seems a stretch to me, but I was looking at the accounts for Alan Weisselberg, the former accountant. He was found guilty on 7 counts of felony, okay? In the state of New York, it's A through E. A is the most serious. So Trump was found guilty for a Class E felony. So what's the judge going to do when it comes to sentencing? Weisselberg had 1 that was C grade, 1 was D grade, and 5 that were E grades, right? Trump technically has 34 that are E grades. Weisselberg is age 76 now. Trump is 77. Is Merchan going to put Trump in jail, Andy?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of pressure on Merchan to have a jail sentence component to the sentence. I don't think he should. I don't think he should put former President Trump, give him a prison sentence. I think that would be really over the top in a case like this. But again, he'll have a lot of pressure to do that. This is a nonviolent felony in New York City where, as some of our reporting has shown, you have people who are committing really serious crimes, including assaults on police officers who are back out on the street and nothing flat. For a case like this, for a former president who is the de facto nominee of the Republican Party in the upcoming election, it seems to me it would be really ridiculous to put him in jail for a crime like this.
So we shall see.
Andy, your piece in the National Review called "In Memory."
Come on, heal, you jerk. Hold on. Let me unscrew my team here. That's one of the downsides of doing low level is people usually don't have gear. And Anyway, the point that he was making that it would be unprecedented and that's why you shouldn't do it. Like, I mean, no. And for two, the whole New York City thing and bringing up cops and cops being assaulted by New Yorkers and then the New Yorker not getting charged. I mean, how about a little bit of context, shall we? I mean, there's stronger protester protections in New York City because there are more protests that happen in New York City, and the police still act as if they're a de facto military in New York City. So, take a lot of that with a grain of salt. A lot of cities and municipalities across the country treat the police better than they treat veterans. I'm assuming the same reason. They venerate their military, quote unquote. And what that results in is police being able to act above the law, which is not okay. And citizens being unduly harassed or threatened by police when they are just defending themselves. So I'm not a fan of that rhetoric, obviously. I think it's disingenuous for two. And again, as the other reporter that we listened to said, like, it's not unprecedented in New York City to charge this crime with jail time. So I think what we're getting is a lot of boilerplate rhetoric and echo chamber discussion, which is not unexpected. I mean, I'm sure there's not a single person on MSNBC saying that they shouldn't arrest the president and that he shouldn't serve jail time, the former president. Like, I'm certain there's not a single person on CNN saying that either. I get that. But you also don't just see blatant disregard for the law on those other cases. And it's 34 counts, not one. If it was one count, even I would agree, yeah, jail time might be a bit excessive. But it's 34 counts that he was found guilty on, plus the 10 obstruction and disregard counts that he violated. Like, I mean, come on. Like, we let's be a little bit realistic and accepting of reality, I think is the word I'm going. Like, I'm at a loss for
regardless
words,
of what
honestly.
happens to Donald Trump. All of us will live to regret it. We commend that to our viewers, and maybe just give you a quick final word about that piece.
You know, Dana, I just think if you look at every society that we've ever had, and in particular in American history, you think about even all those old movies about the frontier, one thing everybody knew is that you needed to have a legal system. You needed to have a justice system that everybody thought was fair in order to have a free and prosperous society. And what I fear when you've turned this into a partisan weapon is that we lose that. And if we lose the undergirding of the rule of law, you can't have a free and prosperous society.
The rule of law is literally what you're saying they shouldn't be doing.
I worry that we don't recognize the damage that's been done here.
Andy, you've been great for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube.
I just think that is quite literally ridiculous. Is how are you going to argue for the law while simultaneously arguing against the law? We should obey the rule of law except for when it is inconvenient. Super frustrating. I don't get it. What's this? This looks interesting.
Can you please chip in just $5 while my dad is...
Nope. Whoops. Skip. Oh, is this Piers Morgan?
Has triggered a predictable outpouring of smugness and glee from celebrities and liberals. Barbara Streisand said that Americans must not allow this felon anywhere near the White House again. Star Trek's George Takei quipped that he should now be called 34 instead of 45. And Joy Behar from The View said she was so excited that she, quote, leaked a bit in Costco. Charming. But could these celebrations be short-sighted and short-lived? The Trump campaign has raised a staggering $200 million since the guilty verdicts rolled in. And he received a hero's ovation alongside Dana White at the UFC event in Newark on Saturday night. And now
That's
even some of Trump's
unfortunate.
political enemies are rallying to his cause. Senator Mitt Romney, very much a moderate of the Republicans, said that Alvin Bragg may have won the battle for now, but he may have lost the political war. Democrats think they can put out the Trump fire with oxygen. It's political malpractice. So is Trump the felon now even more likely to return to the White House? We're here to debate this. It's the Shark Tank investor, Kevin O'Leary, criminal defense attorney, Mark Geragos, host of the Daily Wire's Michael Knowles Show, conservative commentator Michael Knowles, and the very unconservative commentator Francesca Fiorentini. Well, welcome to all of you. Mark Geragos, let me start with you just for the legal perspective here. I think two things can be true at the same time. One is that the jury did their job with the evidence placed in front of them, and that the verdict was a correct one from a legal perspective. And the second view, which can run concurrently with this should never have got to court in the first place, and dragging an American president through a criminal court process over something so relatively trivial, driven by apparent political partisanship on the part of the people driving it, was a catastrophic error of judgment and a disaster for the country. Discuss.
Well, look, I don't disagree with you. You can have these two thoughts in your head. If you're going to bring a criminal case against one of the most reviled people in Manhattan and pick a jury in Manhattan and expect them to do anything but convict him, then I know nothing about the criminal law that I've been trying cases about. That was a slam dunk for the prosecution from the get-go. At the same time, I can tell you that it was, to my mind, it was reprehensible that you take a case that is basically misdemeanors and with an expired statute of limitations, and you do the mental gymnastics to contort this into a target crime that's not defined until closing argument, and make those into felonies, basically reviving an expired statute of limitations. I could go on and on about the legal.
So here's the thing about that. The criminal justice system has absolutely no compunction about arresting somebody and then putting them in jail over the weekend or for several days, depending on the state, and then letting the officers communicate with whatever legal resource they happen to have access to, and research a charge to file against the person that they arrested. And that's all perfectly legal in the vast majority of states. So do not sit there and tell me that there was any sort of mental gymnastics and that this was somehow unprecedented, because when it's against regular poor people, people who weren't the former president, this is the bread and butter. And I'm certain you yourself have been a part of that. The other thing here is, and again, I can't do the research currently right now. Maybe I'll have it done for tomorrow's stream. But there's an overwhelming amount of precedent, allegedly, for these crimes and those charges in the city of in the state of New York. So, again, dismissing white-collar crime because it's a white-collar crime and saying that therefore it shouldn't have been prosecuted is very disingenuous and indicative of the current state of our criminal justice system.
Nonsense that
I keep doing this.
If you just ran for, say, to be CEO of a company, do you think it would ever have led to a criminal case? Because the argument is that a regular business guy who's not actually running for the presidency would be treated very differently, and therefore the law has not been seen to be fairly applied here.
I think half the country in the U.S. believes this is politically motivated, which is not a good thing. It's having more impact on the state of New York, which is seen as unstable. Whether the case has flaws in it or not will be solved for in the appellate system. So most people assume, because of the importance of the situation, that it will go through the appellate system as quickly as possible, if necessary, to the Supreme Court. In the end of the day, these things balance themselves. The damage done to New York started back in the other litigation around real estate. Quietly, large projects, those are over $1 billion, are not being started in New York currently. People are waiting until things stabilize. And I've moved projects out of New York to places like Oklahoma, North Dakota, West Virginia, Montana, Pennsylvania, much more stable environments. It's too difficult to work in that unstable environment. And the real problem is you can't raise institutional capital right now. The capital from around the world thinks New York's a little off kilter. There's something else to consider about Alvin Bragg, which I think history will prove to be correct. You've got to remember, Donald Trump only 24 months ago, in the middle of the first term of Biden, did not have control of his party. About a third of them were rebelling, if you want to use that word, because they were concerned about the controversy around Trump and they were looking for new leadership. And he was challenged. But something happened that changed everything. And this is the law of unintended consequences. Alvin Bragg started charging Trump. And immediately the entire Republican Party coalesced behind him almost in 48 hours. Of course, the country bifurcated into this being a political witch hunt using lawfare, as a tool, and we're still debating that. But here's what's really interesting. If Trump becomes president, I think he has a big debt to Alvin Bragg. Right. Alvin Bragg is the kingmaker. Yeah. He made Trump president by polarizing the country so much and motivating the base so much that in the last 42 hours, Trump has passed $60 million in fundraising. That's an all-time record for him. So what's happening here is this unusual time, and I understand that you may not like that as an unintended consequence if you're Alvin Bragg, but I think history will show he made Donald Trump president one more time. And that's just the way it is.
You know what? I completely agree. I think it's one of the most willful.
So, interesting points that were just brought up there. That the Wilson Bragg or whatever Bragg, he was the one who ended up inadvertently making Trump popular within the Republican Party again and causing the controversy to remain afloat. And that's what I was saying. It's not that Trump is beloved or desired or any of these things. It's when push comes to shove, he has only ever presented himself in one way. I am not them. I am not a politician. I am not them. And because of that, he has staying power in politics, no matter what he does, how heinous it is, or illegal, or what have you. And I think that's the point, if I may, is what Kevin was really trying to get at, or getting at from a different perspective.
I'll come to Francesca for a response. It seems to be one of the most willfully stupid acts of self-harm I've seen any political party commit. You had Trump right on his knees, done. And you've revived the rotting political corpse of this guy, and you've now got him roaring back to the White House. And the only thing, as Mitt Romney, of all people, who hates Trump and represents by absolutely the most moderate part of the Republican Party, when even he says Democrats think they can put out the Trump fire with oxygen, it's political malpractice. He's right, because the only thing that could further guarantee a Trump victory is if they try.
You're the person with the gun, the person who would do anything to protect.
On July the 11th, which, by the way, I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah, it's remarkable times. We haven't seen polls out since the verdict, and so everybody's waiting to see what happens.
Oh, so this was a few days ago.
The unintended consequence of this in terms of just independent voters. And so here's the thing to realize. If you polled 1,000 independent voters, and they will decide the election, most people agree with that in states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, et cetera. I bet you, and we've had the same on this panel, we're debating it, 99% of them have no idea what this case was about at all, and have no idea what exactly he did, and I'm not sure they care. The fact that more than half of them think it's politically motivated is unsettling. Yeah. And as I said earlier, we'll get finished off in the appellate system, but This is a remarkable time in American history and not that great for the American brand, as you started talking about at the beginning. This is more like a Venezuela kind of Cuba, Banana Republic story. You got the porn star. All this stuff is really not what G7 countries do to their leaders.
I completely agree. This is Francesca. I just don't get. We see you're laughing, but Mitt Romney, for Mitt Romney to come down so squarely on the side of Trump.
I do want to just say, look, so the crimes were falsifying business records. Now, the reason I didn't know that before is because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not the journalist who is anchoring this entire show who should have told you that it was falsifying business records. Now, on the other
because
point,
those aren't felonies.
I hear you that most Americans don't care about...
Except, all right, now we are going to do a little bit of fact checking here. In New York City, is falsifying business records a felony? It's going to probably say no, which is fine. It is a Class A misdemeanor with a maximum possible sentence of a year in jail. The act will become felony forgery in the second degree if the written instrument is or is intended to be specific types of documents such as a will, a deed, contract, credit card, public record, or prescription. And this actually correlates to what the legal correspondent in the previous segment was talking about, is that because of the other underlying acts that were involved in this misdemeanor crime, it elevated it to a felony because of the acts themselves, the underlying acts. So this guy smugly smiling, saying, oh, because it was a misdemeanor. Buddy, don't be a smug piece of garbage when if you allegedly know better, you're still withholding information. By all means, be holier than thou if everybody's on the same playing field. And they're like, it would be like, for instance, 5 people walk outside, point at the sky, 6 of them say the sky is blue, and then somebody says the sky is green, and then smugly it's like, no, none of that.
Falsifying business records. I agree with Kevin and I agree with Piers. However, I will say this. Most Americans also are very much go on gut. And they don't like that a candidate is now a convicted felon. But moreover, this candidate is someone who, and it is not the crime, however we know, cheated on his pregnant wife with a porn star in a hotel in Lake Tahoe and then bragged about it and then tried to pay her to shut up and also paid another Playboy bunny to also be quiet about their relationship.
Bill Clinton had sex with an intern in the Oval.
And he was impeached for it. What do you? What
It's the only thing you have.
Well, it's not a bad thing to have.
No one's
unlike
talking
Trump,
about
he was
Bill
president at the time.
You know, I don't mean to pick on Francesca too much here, but it's very telling that even the liberals who are going on television pick on Francesca to defend this ruling have to Google in the breaks to figure out what the crime was, and even then, I'm sorry to say, misrepresent what the actual supposed crime was. The reason here that this has to take. Well, excuse me one second, Francesca. I'll just finish my point.
So this is the thing about debates that I'm sorry. Debates themselves would never devolve to this, like an actual debate, an actual moderated debate that didn't have an agenda, right? This was a dream team of conservative speakers who were all put on a panel to basically agree with one another in varying degrees. So what you have in that situation is you have the 3 people that are going to agree with each other and then the punching bag. And they pick a punching bag that they think is vulnerable, and maybe she is vulnerable. I don't know. I don't really care. But what happens is they will latch on a specific talking point and just not let go. It'll be like a crab when it clenches its pincer. And then they will just act holier than thou and talk over the person to try and shut them down and fluster them. I hate that childish behavior in debate. What passes for debate?
The books, that's the same thing.
Yeah. It's not a felony, not a crime, but anyway, that's a point for another time. The reason why even the great defenders of this conviction can't Yes, to you as well. The reason that they can't articulate this is because it's not really a crime. That's why they had to upend 234 years of precedent for this. And it gets back to a point that you made earlier, Piers, and that you made, Kevin, which is that Alvin Bragg really overplayed his hand. Sure, he overplayed his hand to some degree, but what else were they going to do? Donald Trump was always going to be the Republican nominee in 2024. A lot of people feel that he was gypped in 2020. He's the biggest guy in the party. It was going to happen. And Trump poses a real threat to the liberal establishment. He's not a Mitt Romney type Republican. He has different views from the so-called uniparty on things like trade, on things like immigration, and things like foreign policy and war. Trump posed a major threat. That's why they took such extraordinary measures for the last 8 years to take this guy out. They weren't able to do it politically. They weren't even really able to do it at the ballot box. So what's left? The only thing left to do is to try to throw him in prison so that he can't campaign for the election. I agree, it's backfiring.
This is not a federal case, Michael. You know that. It's not even a federal case. Why do you think that it's not a DOJ case? It's not a Biden case. It's not a Merrick Garland thing. It's New York state law. So the idea that this is somehow politically motivated is all made up in your head, because what you do on your show every day is you groom your audience for fascism and you set them up for a complete takeover of the DOJ. This is all about allowing Trump to get away with any crime he wants, as you sort of slighted and sort of, laid out very nonchalantly just a little bit ago. He was impeached twice. Doesn't really matter that he tried to blackmail the leader of Ukraine into digging up non-existent dirt on Joe Biden, but that doesn't matter to you
Joe
or
Biden
your
threatened
followers.
to withhold arms.
You want to make sure. You want to make sure that when
you're
Trump is
accusing me
reelected,
of fascism.
he can get away.
That's a big,
he can get away
you're
with
accusing
getting
me of
rid of the
fascism. That's a
Department of
big charge.
Education.
All I would point out is that it's not my party that's imprisoning its political opponents.
Right.
So if we're going to throw that accusation about it.
I was about to say.
I mean, honestly, I would love to be on that panel, truthfully, because I would just pull out my little cell phone and pull up fascism or corporatism or whatever ism, and just be like, buddy, this is what you actually are doing. This is actually how you run your show. This is literally the kind of rhetoric you just spouted on here. And yes, you are just blindly giving Donald Trump passes on whatever it is he does and for whatever reason he does them. And of course, Pierce is, again, it's a weighted, stacked panel, and they're using the person on the right as their punching bag. This is less of a debate, even a discussion panel, and more so just a fight club, if you will. I don't even know. I personally don't know who those two people really are. Don't pay attention to them. Obviously, I know who Piers Morgan is and Keith from Shark Tank, but actually, I don't even know who she is for that matter. But I can tell you from my own experience on the CNN debate stage when I was running for DNC chair, this is the exact kind of stupidity that was pulled constantly. Like, not every other question, but this was that was the entirety of the debate, is trying to get you caught up in gotchas and whataboutisms and this, that, and the other, and instead of actually talking about issues or the actual question at hand. It's about who can win the most social points in social media, who can get the most sound bites out at once, and who can make it look like they were in control. As long as you can accomplish those goals, it doesn't matter in these debates. PvP, folks.
One of the key tenets of fascism is you imprison your political opponents. Let me come back to Mark Geragos. I want to play a clip from Donald Trump at the weekend. This is talking to Fox and Friends, where he talks about the prospect of maybe going to jail.
Probably the most common question that I'm asked as a professor.
How many more ads are we going to get?
What happened to my country?
Damn.
The judge could decide to say, hey, house arrest or even jail.
It could.
How do you face what that could look
I'm okay with it. I saw one of my lawyers the other day on television saying, oh, no, you don't want to do that to the president. I said, you don't beg for anything. You just, the way it is. I don't know that the public would stand it, I'm not sure the public would stand for it. with a.
You tried house arrest or.
I think it would be tough for the public to take. You know, at a certain point, there's a breaking point.
Now, Mark, the question I was going to ask you is that a lot of people think the way Trump has been trashing the judge, the court, the process, and everything night after night when he comes out to TV cameras, that under normal circumstances, you could trash talk your way into a prison sentence. Is that remotely possible here?
Well, let me give you the legal analysis and then I'll give you the political. There is no instance I can think of where you're convicted of 34 felonies in state court in America, in any jurisdiction, while you are found in contempt 9 times and a judge threatening to put you in jail, where when you're convicted, the judge doesn't remand you, meaning put you in jail right there pending sentencing. Obviously, that was not going to happen here. Obviously, at least to me politically, this judge is not going to put him in jail on July 11th. I don't even think he's going to give him house arrest. My friend Alan Dershowitz suggested something that I had not thought of. I have been speculating that the judge will give him 30, 60, or 90 days in jail, but stay it pending the appeal. Alan thinks that he will impose a state prison sentence of, say, 2 years and just hang it over his head. And that's somewhat diabolical, because if you've got that state prison sentence over his head and he does not win the election in November, there's all kinds of mischief that could happen after that. So I don't think, if I'm a betting man, I don't think he's going to go into jail or into custody on July 11th. If he was somebody other than Trump, he would be in custody right now.
I mean, Kevin,
which is that is literally the whole point. Like, because of being a powerful individual or somebody with power and whatever, he's not being treated the same as a regular citizen. And that's the whole point that young lady over there was trying to make. Like, buddy, you're literally telling on yourself while arguing against it.
Yes, that's a really important point, and everyone needs to remember that. Yeah,
it is an important point. Kevin, just again, I'm across the pond at the moment, but I love America, and this is just this whole idea that we're even discussing the possibility of incarcerating an American president. I made the point the other day that if it was for running an illegal drone program that killed thousands of innocent people, or it was wholesale corruption on a very serious scale at the heart of government, something of that magnitude, then okay, I'd understand taking action against an American president. But the idea that Trump is going through all this and may end up with a suspended sentence or a hung sentence hanging over him, whatever it may be, as Mark just articulated, the idea that an American president, left or right, is facing this potentially happening in 6 weeks' time, in election year, I mean, it sends a shudder down my spine, if I'm honest, because I don't know what it makes America as a country.
Someone that's really trying to remain democratic.
It's never happened before in a G7 country, and happened once, I believe, in a G20 country, but I think was acquitted. This isn't really about Trump anymore from the perspective you're talking about. It's about the American brand. It's about the executive. It's about the White House. It's about the American economy. It's about people's perception about investing in it. There's a pretty big discomfort, and I know this from both Democrats and Republicans. There's many outcomes of this sentencing, but I don't think anybody contemplates that he would be jailed. That would not go over well, I think, at all. I don't think that would be. This judge has a huge responsibility on his shoulders because it hasn't been tested by the appellate court. So it would be wise, perhaps, to be very, very lenient, and I would suggest probation maybe or something less, so that he can go on with the political process of running, his Republican conference, decide if he's going to be and who his vice president is going to be, and setting up for the election just months away at that point. And as many have said on both sides of the party, let the people decide this situation on November 5th.
Right.
If they make Trump president again, then we're talking about the Oval Office, and we want to be careful not to get in his way as he governs the land. I would have thought bringing the porn star case after the election would have been better. it was really unusual to listen. And I was in London, where you are, talking to sovereign wealth and institutional investors. As you know, I'm trying to buy TikTok, so I'm trying to line up a syndicate. And Stormy Daniels' testimony was embarrassing, talking about condoms and penis size and what does that have to do with state finance or federal finance law? It has nothing. It was really trashy and not at the level you would want to brand a G7 or G20 country. And I think most people are embarrassed about it, to be honest.
I agree with you. And talking of TikTok, Trump joined it, Francesca, at the weekend. He got 3 million followers immediately. But also this happened at the UFC fight. Dana White let him out. And this is just after he'd been convicted of 34 counts of this crime. Take a look at what the crowd reacted was.
Did you know that there is a unique ingredient you can put in your coffee that when you drink it before 10 a.m. melts 3 pounds of fat every 3?
Pretty cool for Sean Strickland to have a moment there with Donald Trump after a win.
President Trump, you're the man, bro. It is a damn travesty what they're doing to you.
That's what I keep saying, is that this is not about Trump as a political figure, as a viable candidate, or anything. It is the personality. That is what he is. He is literally a personality and a brand, if you will. And that is why people will continue to flock to him, because the only thing he has to say at this point is, I am not them and they're coming after me. And there's no validity to it whatsoever. There's none. And there would be no reason to go after him like this either, because if it was found out that this was basically a personal assassination of his character, for political gain, like could you imagine the fallout from that they would suffer from that? Like, never mind the 34 charges. If it was found out that Joe Biden did order this, like, it would be the biggest scandal of the century. So no, there's no way in which this is in any way, form, or fashion politically motivated or anything like what they've been trying to spout here. What this is a cult of personality, and it is a tragedy for our democracy.
That followed the entrance. Sorry, Mark?
By the way, Piers, if I have spent the last 2 days having people talk to me at a conference I'm at, telling me that one of the phenomenons on TikTok, as Kevin invoked it, is people saying, I'm voting for the felon, I'm voting for the felon.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you want a poll? I'll give you a poll. Take a look at what's happening there at the UFC fight and take a look at what's happening on TikTok.
Yeah. I mean, we're watching this is when he came in. I mean, the place went completely nuts. And the trouble is, Francesca, I spend a lot of time in New York and LA. I have a place in LA and spend a lot of time working in New York. But I also do a lot of crime documentaries, ironically, which take me down to rural Florida, rural Texas, Alabama, places like that. And let me tell you, none of them agree with you. They all agree with that crowd at the UFC. And if I was a Democrat, I'd be quite unnerved that you've thrown the kitchen sink at this guy, and this is how a lot of the public are reacting.
Yeah. No, I mean, it makes sense that he'd be cheered.
Which is, by the way, one of the primary points that I was making when I ran for DNC chair, is that the Democratic Party has completely snubbed rural America for so long and so consistently, and to completely write them off, that to do so continuously, to do that in the future, would be detrimental not just to the party, but to the country as a whole, as that divide becomes solidified. And that is what he was just talking about by listing off, as you said, Oshun, the red states. And that is, it just literally keeps going back to, it is less about political ideology and more so about cult of personality. I'm on the red team, therefore I support red things because they are red. I don't understand what the red things are. I couldn't even list them off to you. I support them because they are red. Same is true for the blue team. I support the blue team because the blue team says blue things, and if I was green, dabu dee, dabu die, right? That is our politics right now. Blue team versus red team. That's it. That is literally it. It's not I stand for labor rights. I stand for economic freedom. I stand for universal health care and education, universal housing, universal pay. And this is how I think it should be done. I think this is why we should federalize marijuana. I think this is why we federalize, our utilities and water and telecommunications, airline, whatever, right? Those aren't the conversations that are being had. What's being had is you're a filthy Republican. You're a filthy Democrat. You're a filthy libertarian. So the disingenuous behavior, honestly, I legitimately hope to selflessly and shamelessly plug myself enough to get onto the Piers Morgan uncensored panel. I would be delighted.
UFC, it's a sport full of actors, and we have this guy who's been pretending to be a serious politician for years now. Look, the
they're not
important thing
actors
about
in.
that interview
Sorry,
that he gave
hang
to
on,
Fox
hang on.
News.
You're not besmirching
The important thing
UFC.
about the
Hang
Fox
on.
News-
Hold on. You're not going to disparage the UFC, but I'm going to disparage all over you repeatedly, dismiss you, mock you, and absolutely harass you on my show and channel on this panel and allow everybody else to do that when I have 7 million subscribers. Please, somebody sign the petition to get me on the Piers Morgan show.
Hang on.
I would love to
fact check.
spar with this
You're
man
thinking
intellectually.
WWE, the actors. The UFC, they're real fighters.
Yes. Oh, sorry. I don't have. Cool. Good. I'm glad. Look,
There's a
I
big
still
difference.
think that
One is
for a
act-
lot-
What was the CIA document? So I don't know if you guys know this, and this is going to sound very conspiratorial, but the CIA had a document in the 1940s, 50s that they distributed to Americans working overseas in the Soviet bloc. And that document outlined in many different ways how to sabotage and undermine Soviet operations. To include, if you are working in a company just as a regular worker in the Soviet Union, these are some of the things that you should do to make the workspace as inefficient as humanly possible. And you know what one of them was? Focus on a task and a point and a question that has no bearing on the task at hand, that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, and waste as much time focusing on that, distracting to bring it back to that point, interrupting people to get back to that point to disrupt the discussion. And what truly gets me and confounds me is that I am absolutely, unequivocally certain that Pierce and the guy in the middle and the guy to the right, Kevin's been the only one that's actually been acting like a human being. All three of them are probably unironically doing this because they are just idiots and don't actually know how to have a discussion or deal with any sort of contradiction to their strongly held beliefs. And yet, unironically, they are acting in the same exact way that the CIA prescribed to sabotage an enemy nation state. I actually go into this in several of my videos in the YouTube channel about how our modern day economy, our capitalist society is actually centered around those tenets. It's a reason why your boss acts the way they do. It's a reason why questions are asked the way that they're asked. It's a reason why we're going to circle back and get back to it and this, that, and lead you on and do this and promote bad actors. It's literally following the CIA doctrine, which is mind-blowing when you consider these people are acting like scumbags because they just happen to be scumbags. And yet the CIA recognized that that behavior is so detrimental to an infrastructure and organization that it can ruin it. And people unironically act like this. Mind-blowing. Oshun, yes. Pierce has 3 people who are pro-Trump and 1 who isn't, so they all gang up on her. The only one who is not pro-Trump and the only woman, great optics. I know you stepped away from the stream and came back to make this comment, but this was literally something I had addressed throughout this conversation. It's obscene to me too, because you'll notice in conservative circles, optics doesn't matter nearly as much. Hey, let's go ahead and insult the black person. Yeah, let's get the queer person on here and make fun of them. To them, it is a badge of honor. It is an award. It's something that they wear on their shoulder with pride, and they beat their chest with, I did that. I put them in their place. I put that woke sissy in their place. I put that progressive leftist Asian putz in her place. She was so stupid. She didn't even know what she was talking about. She didn't even know that the UFC were real fighters. Like, come on. How could we take her seriously? We put her in her place. Meanwhile, on the left, they'll spend more time bickering about pronouns than actually talking about the actual substance. To which end, when I say that this is the structure of debates, the left does it too. And the left does similar tactics of disparagement, just in a different circle, in a slightly different context. And I was witness to this when I was on the DNC debate stage, when I was in Houston, when I was in DC, and when I was on CNN in Atlanta. So it's kind of silly to me that national level debates and politics and this, that, and the other almost always devolve to bickering at a kindergarten level. And it's difficult for someone to be the Kevin O'Leary on the panel, because he's literally the only adult in the room. And notice he doesn't chime in. He keeps his mouth shut. He doesn't say anything disparaging. He says what he says and moves on. If he addresses anything, he'll address it and leave it at that. No personal attacks, no slander, no nothing. Like, but that's boring, right? It's not entertaining. That's not how you're going to get the clicks. You're not going to get the clicks by, as President of the United States, I will do the following things in this order, with this context, pretext, and fully researched undertone and continuous and discussion. Vote for me, like and subscribe, because I am going to do great things for you, and we will do them together, right? That's not exciting. Might sound cool for a minute, but then it's going to be wah, 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 wah. Which is why when you're making YouTube content, it's okay to do that kind of educational, intellectual discourse, because people who want to watch that will. When you're doing Twitch, right, you have to be a little bit more entertaining. And I get it. For a minute there, I was just watching the game or playing my game and listening, and that's not exciting. I get that. I 100% get that. But these conversations, these interactions, discussing the high level and the low level behavior of these panelists, that's when the interest comes into play. It's like, oh, this is what we're missing? Oh, I always thought it was weird that there was always, this gang mentality of like, why would they have a panel with only one person that disagreed? Like, that always seemed weird to me, and they always seemed stupid or like they were being ignored and talked over. That's why, right? And these are the things that we need to recognize as a country. If we want to start doing better for not only ourselves but each other, these are the things we need to start recognizing and start holding accountable. But on that note, it has been, believe it or not, 3 hours. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you coming to the channel. In fact, we'll go ahead and do this proper. Thank you all for coming. Please leave a follow. Please share the videos to your various social medias. Save SaSeshen to your watch list and whatever have you. I hope to see you again tomorrow. And on that note, look forward to it and have a great rest of your evening.